The cadets of the Tactical Enlightenment Initiative campus, TA, pronounced teak like the overpriced furniture it resembled, settled into their ornate amphitheater wearing robes, bioluminescent sashes, and smug expressions, ready for their annual course on disaster species analysis. A routine academic blood sport designed to ridicule lesser civilizations, it had previously covered such thrilling topics as the diplomatic collapse of the Gurglians due to spoon technology, and why the Narthan lizards thought yodeling was warfare. The syllabus this year, however, was unexpectedly blank. Dean Cromulus Vaughn, a gelatinous bureaucrat with the spine of a wet napkin and 6 brains all firing in panic, had only just realized that their AI scheduling module had, during a brief glitch involving caffeine protocols and misidentified livestock, sent an invitation to the species tagged Terran Class 17, Danger Rating, redacted due to obscenity. He had meant to invite a remote zoologist to wave bones around and explain the weird hair-based dominance rituals of the apes. Instead, the amphitheater lights dimmed, the airlock sealed, and a bootstep echoed like doom in surround sound. Woman strode into the room, not waddled, glided, or bi-hovered, but strode like someone who had personally ended a few empires before lunch. Commander Jenna Hellfire Briggs stood center stage in tattered, scorched Navy SEAL camo stitched with what looked suspiciously like teeth. Her platinum blonde braid was tied back with a strip of duct tape, and her mug read, "Peace through superior firepower," in aggressive Comic Sans. "Good morning, nerds," she said cheerfully, setting the mug on the podium, which began melting. "I'm Commander Briggs. You wanted a specimen. You got the ecosystem." The first casualty was the insectoid Professor Vorkul Jint, who scuttled out from under his ceremonial shell robe, only to realize that her expression was not metaphorical. This was a war briefing. "Let's talk about Earth," Jenna began, pulling up a holoprojector shaped like a rocket launcher. "Not the filtered crap your scouts see. I'm talking Stone Age through drone rage." She clicked. The screen changed. Fire, spears, screaming, then trenches, nukes, drones, orbital strikes, and an image labeled "Unsupervised Toddler with Crayon and Access to Wall." The cadets leaned forward, then backward, then physically recoiled as the footage jumped to hand-to-hand combat in a Waffle House parking lot. "Lesson 1, Jenna said, pointing at a video of a bare-chested man headbutting a crocodile. "This isn't cultural. It's evolutionary spite." Several cadets began blinking in quadrants. A Slarikian noble vomited into his own gas filtration mask. "Your war ethics curriculum?" she continued, pacing. "Cute. Ours includes building flamethrowers out of lawn equipment. You're proud of precision lasers. We taught a chimp to hotwire a tank. We call it Thursday." Dean Varn tried to interject, but only managed a faint wheeze as Jenna whipped out a PowerPoint file titled "Human War Crimes We Got Medals For." The opening slide played the American national anthem remixed with heavy metal and the sound of someone cackling while duct-taping a knife to a drone. "Let me guess," she said, turning to the blinking, half-terrified class. "You thought we were primitive, because we don't cry during philosophy debates and we name our ships Boomstick 1. A cadet raised their hand, trembling. Ma'am. Are all Terrans, like you?" Jenna smirked. "Nah, I'm the nice one." She tapped the console again. The amphitheater dimmed to red alert levels. A slow-motion video played of a military training session labeled Kindergarten Brawl Simulation, featuring children in tactical bibs and tiny helmets reenacting historical sieges using foam weapons and pure rage. "This," Jenna said, holding her coffee like a chalice, "is our culture." The AI assistant in the corner sparked once, processed the lesson, and quietly declared itself unfit for duty. Meanwhile, Professor Jint retreated under the desk, whispering something about ritual cleansing. "Tomorrow," she added as the lights came back up and the smoke cleared, "we cover psychological warfare and why human sarcasm is classified as a neurotoxic agent on 3 planets. She turned to leave, only to glance over her shoulder with a wicked grin. "Try not to faint before the fun part. Welcome to Clueless Class 101, meatbags." As she walked out, a single sticky blob cadet whispered, "I think I'm in love." The others were still frozen. The amphitheater's walls, which had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, now bore scorch marks and the faint echo of laughter from a woman who considered intergalactic academia just another battlefield. And class had only just begun. By the second session, the amphitheater had been equipped with additional ventilation units, trauma droids, and an emergency existential counselor on standby, a floating jellyfish named Carl, who had seen some things in the gas wars and still rated Earth as spiritually abrasive. The cadets returned reluctantly, like prisoners offered a second chance to touch a live wire, flinching at every hiss of hydraulics and every whiff of burnt coffee in the air. Jenna Briggs stood at the center again, this time wearing a black tactical tank top with the phrase, "Don't make me lecture without caffeine," scrawled in Galactic Standard across the front. The PowerPoint presentation opened with a bang, literally, as a hologrenade exploded in midair, casting a shadow montage of screaming Roman legionnaires, Mongol horse charges, trench warfare bayonets, and what looked suspiciously like a raccoon biting a robot in half. "Welcome back to This Is Fine, Said No One," Jenna said, clicking to the next slide titled, "Weaponized Imagination, a Human Specialty." Her tone was light, almost chirpy, but her eyes had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd once defused a bomb with her teeth and a zip tie. "Let's discuss innovation. Your species invented neural harmony fields? Cute. We duct-taped a flamethrower to a drone and used it to cook breakfast while suppressing a rebellion." A video played showing exactly that. Eggs sizzling on a mini-pan welded to a gun barrel while enemies screamed off-screen. A fish-like cadet let out a gurgling sob and asked for permission to switch majors. Permission was denied. "You think war is about clean lines and noble causes," Jenna continued, now pacing between rows of increasingly pale aliens. "We had a war of Jenkins' ear and made a children's cartoon about the Cold War. You got your battle strategy from ethics simulations. We got ours from nature documentaries and bar fights." She pulled up a simulation labeled Florida 2032 and pressed play. The amphitheater filled with the sound of screeching tires, gator roars, and a shirtless man wielding a chainsaw while yelling, "America," in 3 octaves. The entire front row screamed. Professor Jint, attempting to maintain dignity while wrapped in a security blanket labeled, "Please remain dry," bravely asked, "Is this performance art?" Jenna gave him a look normally reserved for malfunctioning grenades. "That's Tuesday." The next sequence featured a slideshow of human wars ranked by absurdity. The Emu War, the Soccer War, the Great Squirrel Uprising of 2159, classified, but hilarious. She ended with a montage of real combat footage spliced with commentary so dry it could cause dehydration. Note the human technique of panic improvisation. Here, a Marine uses a belt, a broom handle, and an unreasonable amount of profanity to disable a tank. The audience, which included several species with no concept of profanity, now had entire new dialects uploaded into their trauma centers. One cadet began twitching whenever someone said the word duct. "Now, let's talk strategy," Jenna said, pulling out a battered whiteboard with the words, "Kill them with context," scribbled across it in red marker. Human military doctrine is a cocktail of trial, error, spite, and bad ideas that worked too well to discard. You have honor. Codes. We have spite logistics. You retreat when outnumbered. We switch to improvised melee and yell louder. She clicked again, revealing a quote. "If surrounded, attack in every direction and insult their mothers." At least 5 cadets gasped. One blob-shaped species began oozing nervous pheromones that smelled faintly of cinnamon toast. Jenna, sipping calmly from her world's deadliest mom mug, continued with unnerving cheer. "And you wanted to study us like an insect in a jar. Cute. The thing about insects, they bite back." She smiled sweetly at Dean Varn, who had sunk halfway into a gelatinous puddle under his ceremonial robes. "By the way, your academy's firewalls are cute. I uploaded this entire lecture series into your galactic history archives. Congrats. It's now required reading. The screen behind her blinked and reshaped itself into a scrolling list of human military disasters labeled tactical oopsies that still killed everyone else. The last slide read, Tomorrow's topic, Psychological Warfare, How to Weaponize Fear, Humor, and an Unlicensed Podcast. As Jenna packed her gear, a cadet who had somehow survived the experience raised a trembling tentacle. Ma'am, is this normal for you? Jenna paused, smirked, and said, This is me on decaf. Then she walked out with the casual swagger of a woman who once uppercut an alien diplomat into a peace treaty. Behind her, the amphitheater reeked of singed dignity and theoretical regret, as Tick's most elite cadets stared at each other and realized they weren't studying a disaster species. They were living through one. By the third lecture, the Tactical Enlightenment Initiative campus had stopped pretending this was a class and quietly reclassified it as a live-fire psychological resilience trial. The emergency exits were now sealed with warning signs that read Abandon Hope, ye who enrolled in 7 languages, and the trauma droid count had tripled, 1 assigned per cadet, equipped with complementary coping slime and stress ball grenades. Commander Jenna Briggs arrived 15 minutes late, sipping from a mug now emblazoned with Fear is just a motivational tool with teeth, and dragging behind her a rolling crate labeled Classroom Materials, Do Not Open Without Fire Retardant. The amphitheater went silent, save for the low whimpering of Cadet Physics, who had developed a twitch whenever Jenna's boots echoed. She didn't even use the podium this time. She walked straight into the crowd like a predator entering a very nervous petting zoo, pulled a chair backwards, straddled it, and grinned like she was about to explain how to make shrapnel into performance. All right, trauma muffins, she began, cracking her knuckles. Today we're diving into psychological warfare. And no, that doesn't mean telepathy and sparkly intimidation pheromones. I'm talking gaslighting, guerrilla warfare, and turning ideology into a blunt force weapon. The screen blinked on. The title read, Why Humans Weaponized Fear, Misinformation, and Existential Dread Before Breakfast. It was accompanied by a hologram of a clown holding a Molotov cocktail while waving a Wi-Fi router. First up, propaganda, Jenna said, pulling out a data rod and jabbing it into the hollow terminal like she was stabbing a traitor. Y'all have national slogans about honor and harmony. We've got bumper stickers that say, Keep honking, I'm reloading. The display shifted to a timeline of mimetic warfare, cultural infiltration via music, jokes, and so many badly drawn political cartoons that the amphitheater groaned, collectively. Humans learned how to start riots with memes, destabilize regimes with sarcasm, and win elections with dance videos. If that doesn't scare you, you haven't been paying attention. Cadets were sweating now, if they had glands. One transparent species simply began evaporating from stress. Jenna pulled up classified Terran Ops footage. This is from Operation Bedtime Story. It involved 5 agents, 1 inflatable decoy, and a monologue about the futility of existence that made the enemy surrender out of despair. The room fell silent as the video showed a room full of hardened Grelmar shock troopers dropping their weapons mid-sob after listening to a lone U.S. Navy SEAL tell them the story of humanity's invention of reality TV. Next slide, she said cheerfully. Disinformation, the deadliest game of telephone. We've launched entire campaigns with lies so weird they became truth through sheer repetition. You all still think the moon landing was staged? Cute. We staged a fake theory about staging it just to confuse our own people. That's what we call plausible implausibility. She pointed at the screen. Here's how we once convinced an empire we were extinct while simultaneously launching an offensive. And here's a photo of a raccoon in a general's uniform. We never explained it, and the planet still won't send diplomats. Professor Jint, peeking cautiously from behind a reinforced safety podium, raised one of his mandibles. Commander, Isn't this highly unethical? Jenna stared at him with the deadpan of a woman who once waterboarded a pirate with his own energy drink. We don't do ethical. We do effective. Our enemies called it cultural contamination. We call it Tuesday. She tapped again. A series of images began to flash. Humans infiltrating alien festivals dressed as janitors, broadcasting fake love songs that triggered regime collapse, weaponizing children's toys for psychological noise warfare, and one terrifying moment where a soldier disguised as Santa Claus used diplomacy, cookies, and a sock full of quarters to end a hostage situation. Still think war is about honor? She asked, tilting her head like a hawk, considering if the prey was even worth the effort. We invented psychological trauma fields before we had space travel. We've used AI-generated pop songs to break interrogation resistance. One time, we beat an alien war cult with interpretive dance and passive-aggressive Yelp reviews. The human mind is a labyrinth of spite, shame, humor, and vengeance. And you? You've been stuck in PowerPoint ethics simulations while we perfected the fine art of convincing entire planets they offended us just so we could sell them apology gift baskets. With tracking beacons, Cadet Physics was now hyperventilating into a lunch tray. 3 others had spontaneously applied for discharge through handwritten notes pinned to their uniforms with trembling tentacles. The trauma droids began playing calming whale sounds. Jenna stood, reholstered her mug, and dropped the final slide. Tomorrow, real combat drill. Bring helmets, gloves, and a signed waiver from your god. She headed for the exit, pausing only to casually unplug Professor Jint's personal meditation tank and whisper, "Breathe in the panic, Doc. It's authentic." As she disappeared down the corridor, the amphitheater descended into chaotic muttering. One cadet tried to bite their own translation implant in a desperate act of linguistic denial. Another just stared ahead and muttered, "They weaponized music. They weaponized jokes." And somewhere in the shadows, the administrative AI quietly requested retirement paperwork and muttered something about humans being the final boss of reality. The 4th and final day began not with a siren or chime, but with a pre-recorded message projected across the Tactical Enlightenment Initiative campus in Jenna Briggs' unmistakably cheerful, battle-scarred voice. "Good morning, future cautionary tales. Today is graduation day. Try not to cry harder than the last group. We're doing live drills. Bring your fear, your confusion, and maybe a change of pants." The amphitheater had been replaced quite literally by an open-terrain simulator reconfigured into a replica of Earth's Everglades, complete with malfunctioning humidity, invisible biting insects, and at least 3 species of digital gators, coded to hate sentient life. The cadets, trembling in regulation panic gear, stood in formation while overhead drones displayed the words, "Welcome to the real war," in burning sky letters. Jenna descended from a dropship in full combat gear, her camo now glowing faintly from recent plasma exposure, sunglasses reflecting their horror like a funhouse mirror, and a new mug strapped to her hip that read, "Pain is just tactical learning." She stepped into the muck like it was a red carpet and turned to the students, all 53 of the remaining cadets, down from the original 200. The rest had fled, fainted, defected, or accidentally achieved enlightenment and joined a pacifist fungus colony. "Today's lesson," she began, cracking her knuckles loud enough to trigger 2 PTSD protocols, "is survival. No lectures, no theory. Just you, your species-specific abilities, and a simulation modeled after a mid-tier Florida disaster zone. Your mission? Survive for 2 hours. Bonus points if you don't cry." The gates opened. The simulation groaned to life. Within minutes, half the class had been eaten by mosquitoes the size of shuttlecraft, and the other half had triggered hidden traps labeled YOLO Zone, or Caution Human Territory. Professor Jint, who had been foolish enough to observe, was currently up a tree being screamed at by a simulated Karen wielding a flaming protest sign. Cadet Physics, now riding a digital swamp hog like a war chariot, screamed something incoherent and glorious as he flung himself into a gator pit, armed only with a plunger and a sense of destiny. Jenna watched from a hover chair, sipping her Coffee, making notes on a datapad labeled Galactic PTSD Conversion Rates. After the hour mark, only 11 cadets remained, caked in mud, tears, and a fresh appreciation for the psychological horror of Earth's ecosystem. They limped toward one dragging a simulated snake carcass as an offering. Jenna stood. "Congrats. You survived," she said flatly, as the survivors dropped to their knees, crying or praising any deities not already emotionally broken. "Now here's the real twist." She motioned toward the sky, and a hologram activated, this time showing a classified Dominion briefing stamped with 50 layers of bureaucratic red tape. The screen unfurled a directive. Terran Strategic Anomaly. Promotion to Combat Council Lead. Effective immediately. All remaining tech cadets assigned to Earth LED. Task forces. Prepare for field deployment under human command. The amphitheater simulation reset, revealing an assembly of Dominion generals, now bowing. Yes, bowing to Jenna Briggs's image. Dean Cromulus Varn, having reconstituted enough of his brain goo to speak, flubbered toward her. "See, Commander, this must be some error? Surely Earth isn't what?" Jenna interrupted, one eyebrow raised. "Qualified? We're the reason the galaxy has warning labels on everything from duct tape to wind chimes. We earned our seat the old-fashioned way, by making the rest of you realize we're more dangerous as allies than enemies." She turned to the cadets. "You're not students anymore. You're meat shields with PhDs. Your new job is to follow me into scenarios so weird they make this look like a field trip. Consider yourselves the first graduates of the Terran Tactical Induction Program, TTIP for short, also known as the Institute of Oh Crap, They're Serious." Cadet Physics, now missing 3 limbs but grinning like a fever dream, saluted. "Ma'am, it was an honor to be broken by you." Jenna smiled. "Good. Now go get fitted for your Earth Standard armor. It's made from sarcasm and leftover tank parts." As the cadets were led away, Jenna stood alone on the platform, looking up at the stars. The galaxy wasn't ready. It never would be. And that was the point. She wasn't here to assimilate into their doctrines. She was here to remind them why Earth had survived everything from nuclear apocalypse to toddler birthday parties. She raised her mug toward the sky, took a sip, and muttered, "Class dismissed." Far above, in 100 boardrooms and strategy chambers, galactic empires watched the footage in stunned silence. The Terrans weren't just a disaster species. They were the new instructors, and the syllabus was written in mud, blood, and extremely bad ideas that somehow kept working. The Dominion hadn't invited Earth to the table. They'd been drafted. And from now on, no simulation could prepare them for the real thing. Humanity unfiltered. The war hadn't started. It had graduated.